Welcome to... Damn, I can't... Welcome to Tomes of the Traveler. The series by Zealots of Birbio. In this series, we're going to talk about the true RPG and just any general... Oh, I could have named it Tomes of the True RPG. That also is alliteration. Welcome to the True RPG Tomes of the Traveler. In this series, we're going to be explaining, or I alone, I'm going to be explaining all of the little rules and that sort of thing of the true RPG. And in this episode, the first episode of this series, I'm going to be explaining how to create a true RPG character sheet, or rather fill it out. This episode is not going to be explaining how to create a good character or any of that sort of thing. That's more of a broad RPG topic. We'll probably have that in this series in the future, but at this point in time, we're just talking about the mechanics of the true RPG and making a character sheet. There are a few things you need to know about making a character sheet in the true RPG. When you have a character sheet, once you've filled it out and all that, that's all you need in playing the game for the most part. Like, there are going to be a few things like when you get new powers, for example, you'll have to look through the site or whatever and have like all the power trees at your disposal. But other than that, for the most part, it's going to be just all in your character sheet while you're playing. That's going to be what you do. So you'll be able to look on your character sheet or just in your own minds, because a lot of it is with creativity, especially in Magic. So it's like you have to either just think about things and be creative, or you'll have to look on your character sheet and be like, oh, I can do this. These are my weapons, these are my skills, these are that kind of thing. And so, first what you need is a character sheet. And that's pretty self-explanatory, but there are actually two character sheets. One is optional, so the secondary one is optional, but it is good to have because it has like some of the more specific things like insanity and like base willpower and skill points and that kind of thing, just to make it easier, because normally you'd have to keep track of that on the bottom of your page. But instead, you can do that all in one place, so I guess technically two places, two character sheets. But the first character sheet, that's the main one. That's the one that you need for the most part. And so when you're making your character sheet, you definitely need to focus on your first character sheet. That's like that's where most of your mechanical stuff is going to be. The second one has like notes and reputation and extra space for like inventory and weapons, that sort of thing. But the first character sheet, that has like, it's more broad. It has everything you need, including stats. Stats are like the most important kind of part of everything you do with your character. The rest kind of just like sprouts out of that. And so once you have your stats, that's actually the second step, is choosing your stats. So in the true RPG, it's a polar stat system, so you get to choose where your stats are, and it doesn't make you necessarily any more powerful than another player who chooses different stats, or player character, rather. But what it does is it makes it so that you can either go to more extremes, meaning that if, for example, with invested and cool, if you're +2 invested, that means you will not be cool. And so if you ever need to roll for cool, you'll have -2 to cool rolls. So it's kind of like that. It's like a sacrifice if you go to an extreme. And if you decide to go in the middle for everything, that means you're not necessarily going to be good at anything, but you're not necessarily going to be bad at anything. So the stats kind of have to decide what you add or subtract from your rolls, and also decide what powers you can choose. After you choose your stats, you should choose your skills. If they decide to choose 5 skills, that's what most DMs would do. I think it even says that in the rules. Choose 5. But you could do up to 10. 10 is the maximum for skills, keep that in mind. Once you get 10, you just gain skill points, which go towards more powers, and you can swap out your skills whenever you get a new one. And you get a skill whenever you roll a 1 on trying to do something, and you get the skill in that thing that you were trying to do, according to that stat. So pretty much what you choose at the beginning will define what your character's abilities are before the campaign, like based on their backstory, based on what they would do. And always just kind of keep in mind, even when choosing like stats and skills and all that, make sure you know where these are coming from and have like a bit of a base reason for why you're choosing these stats and skills. Like, for example, if they have +2 invested, maybe something happened in their backstory that really made them invested in their world and made them really intense about everything they're going into. Or maybe something happened in their backstory that made them really just not care. They became apathetic. They're like, I've been through so much that, like, oh yeah, this peasant's mocking me, I don't give a crap. Like, there's a spectrum, right? It is a spectrum of stats. So there you go. And when choosing skills, talk with your game master. Make sure that the skills aren't too vague or too specific. Like, if they're too specific, then they're just going to be bad. Sometimes you want like 2 or 3 of your skills, maybe just one of your skills. If it's a creative skill that, like, you wouldn't think initially, you wouldn't think of a mechanical use for, like some skills like dodging bashing weapons kind of thing. That kind of skill, sure, you could name it something different, but that's what it does in its base, is just you dodge bash weapons. That's a purely mechanical skill. But if you have a skill like, for example, Periete in the stain on his hide, he has the skill abstract point of view. I think it's under weird. Like, that's such a cool skill, and he uses it in, like, very creative ways that really help him in the situation, but you wouldn't think of any normal uses for that skill. So just doing that, having 1 or 2, maybe 3 skills that are creative skills, where you could creatively apply them to your situation, that's always good to do. But yeah, once again, talk to your DM, make sure that they're balanced, that kind of thing. Like, if your skill is destroy human or something like that, it's like, okay, well, that's ridiculous. You can't just add damage like that. And also with skills, they only exist for D10 rolls. Adding anything for D4 rolls is a power, and adding anything for D6 rolls, that would just be, like, pretty much for magic. But yeah, in this game, pretty much what you use is just the D10. This is the only dice you use. Besides, like, the occasional willpower roll or insanity roll, which is a D4, and then the occasional magic damage roll or that sort of thing, which is a D6. So next we move on to powers, and this part is a little bit complex, so stay tuned. So when we touch on powers are deeply based in what your character can do, and this is actually a way that you can kind of get better than other players, or player characters. This is a way that your player character, in a way, is leveling up throughout a campaign and getting stronger and getting better at what they're already doing. And so powers, it's all based around a power tree, which is a somewhat new system in the True RPG from this point. And with the power trees, you pretty much have to start at the bottom of the tree and then build your way up. There are certain prerequisites which you have to meet in order to get certain powers, like if you're going through the cool power tree, you have to have like +2 cool for certain ones, +3 cool maybe even. And so you have to pretty much increase your stat, or have your stat initially at a certain level for you to be able to get those powers. And so you have to keep that in mind. But also with powers, in order to get them in the first place, you need skill points. So I briefly mentioned them earlier, and that's when you reach 10 skills, you get skill points pretty much. Or whenever you gain a skill, really, you get a skill point. And the DM can start you out with anywhere from 10 to 100 skill points. 10 skill points would be like really bad, but then 100 skill points would be like max level kind of characters, like level 20, I guess, in D&D. It'd be really powerful characters. Usually what I like to do is 30 for start, maybe even 50. 50 is like a nice range where they can do a lot of things, but they're still limited and it's balanced. If they have any more than that, it can get like hard to I usually say DM, hard to game master? Hard to run a game with them. So, after you get your powers, your extra skill points that you didn't use for powers, go into your skill points spot on your second character sheet, and remember to write that down. So after choosing your powers, write them in your power section on your main character sheet, and we'll move on to the next spot, which is weapons. So when choosing your weapons, make sure you talk to the game master again. That's very important. Consult with them, see if there are certain weapons that are really rare. Like in my world, I have guns, and I allowed the players to start out with guns if they desired. But for the most part, guns are really rare. So if they lost them, which one of the players did at this point, then it's really hard to get another gun. And even I could have had him roll. And what you could do is, as a game master, I could have the players roll the dice and see, because of the rarity of the weapon, if they actually have that weapon. And you could do the same thing with armor, shields, that sort of thing. But yeah, and so pretty much what you do, just familiarize yourself with all of the damage type, like just read the pages, read the rules on damage type and weapons and all that. It's a little bit complex, It would be a lot to explain. I'd have to have a whole video kind of to explain that right now. But familiarize yourself with that. You can use, on the second character sheet, you can use those slots. It's a little bit bigger, a little more specific. You can plot in everything. It looks really nice. But if you want to just make it like shrunken down and simple, then you can do it on the first character sheet, the main one. And just write your weapons. You don't have too many weapons. Also, think about how your character would carry all these weapons. If they have 38 great swords, that doesn't make any sense at all. Think about that as well, and probably talk to your game master. That's probably the best thing to do in this situation. And so, yeah, when creating that, choose your weapons, and then also number 6, choose your shields, armor, and pretty much just other inventory items. The inventory items that you choose could exist for like mechanical purpose, but usually don't do that. It's probably better. Your game master will probably allow you to have more items or different items or creative items that are more for role-playing, as opposed to mechanical items. They might allow mechanical items like a bear trap, that kind of thing, but for the most part, it's probably a safer bet to have a lot of non-mechanical items. Like, think about their clothing. Think about what games or toys or instruments or hobby items they would have. Think about what like food they would have. Like, for example, Xin Jiang has a bunch of fruits in his bag. That's just a cool like character thing, so he takes weird fruits out. So yeah, just think about that kind of thing, and then write all those things in your inventory slots on either of your character sheets. And remember to also put your weapons and armor and shields and all that there. You also don't have to have shields or armor, based on what your character has and what would make sense for them. And so after choosing all those, make sure, you don't have to, like, this is totally optional, and this is touching in on like how to make a good character, but if you add one adjective, maybe 2 adjectives, but just at least 1 adjective to each of your things, like rather than saying a robe, you could say a seafoam robe, like the color, or an azure robe, or azure armor. Like, just adding a color, or adding some sort of like rough spiked armor, something like that. That can just add some more flavor to your character, make it a little nicer in terms of flavor. So after that point, there are a few more things you need to fill in, such as your name. That's pretty important, and you should know notes and NPC reputation sections they stay empty. Those kind of are filled in throughout the game. But yeah, so your name you should fill in. Insanity just starts at 1. It doesn't really affect your character much, but you could increase it if you really want to. Base willpower is going to be 2 or 3, usually 3, but if your DM is like, yeah, you're kind of in a situation where it would be 2, that makes sense. Skill points is whatever you left over after choosing your powers, and then harm is always just going to be 0 unless like something happened right before the session, but harm pretty much just like, it's most likely going to be just 0, which means that you're not harmed at all. And then, yeah, shield defense and base defense, that's kind of determined by your armor, your shields, and any like magic or powers or that sort of thing. And then also your base willpower is going to be the same as your like, or I guess your normal willpower is going to be the same as your base willpower. Also, you can see those 4 spots below the stats section on the main character sheet. I would write everything in on those very lightly because you're going to have to change those a lot. Maybe not so much base defense and like shield defense. You will have to change those if you take off armor, that kind of thing, or don't have a shield on you. For other things, for like willpower, that'll change a lot depending on the campaign and how dramatic it is. And then for something like harm, also how like much combat there is in the session, that sort of thing. So that'll be dependent upon that. And so those are 7 steps to making a true RPG character sheet, and like in the mechanical side of it. I hope you enjoyed. I definitely did. And farewell. The Zealots of Birbio wish you a grand day. Join us next time for Tomes of the Traveler. Is that what I called?